Darkness swallows the narrow prison corridor as the night shift begins its slow, predictable march. Heavy steel doors stand like silent sentinels. Cameras blink their red lights. Every inch of the place screams escape is impossible. Yet somewhere in this labyrinth of concrete and steel, a man is already 3 steps ahead. They called him Prison Houdini. Not as a joke, not as a cheap headline, but because he earned it, again and again. 7 escapes, 7 humiliations for the prison system, 7 reminders that no wall is truly unbreakable. Imagine a life where freedom is measured in inches, where each breath tastes of iron and disinfectant. Most inmates resign themselves to the rhythm of captivity, but not him. For him, every guard rotation was a calculation. Every click of a lock was music. Every routine was an opportunity. The first time he broke free, people thought it was luck, a fluke, maybe even a clerical error. How else could a man slip through a facility built to crush the human spirit? But when it happened again, then a third, a fourth time, luck was no longer an explanation. This wasn't chance. This was genius. His real name is whispered like a dare in the prison yards. The files on his escapes are thicker than most inmates' entire criminal records. He didn't just break rules, he rewrote the entire playbook. Guards studied his methods the way athletes review game footage, desperate to figure out how he turned their own routines into a set of stepping stones. Each escape became more audacious than the last, scaling razor wire fences under a storm, vanishing through ventilation shafts barely wide enough for a child, forging documents that fooled seasoned wardens. Sometimes he was gone for days, sometimes for months. Every time, law enforcement poured millions into tracking him down, and every time, when they finally did, the legend only grew. But the question isn't only how he escaped, it's why. Was it pure survival instinct? A hunger for freedom? Or something darker? A compulsion to outsmart the entire system, to prove that no one could cage his mind. Tonight, we peel back the layers of the man behind the myth. We'll dive into the childhood that shaped him, the precision of his planning, and the psychological warfare he waged against the world's toughest prisons. So, settle in. Because this isn't just the story of a criminal. It's the story of a human puzzle. A man whose brilliance forced governments to rethink the meaning of security itself. This is Prison Houdini. Exposed. The man who would one day humiliate correctional officers across the country was not born a myth. His story started in a cramped 2-room apartment on the edge of a decaying industrial town. Rusted factory roofs and cracked sidewalks shaped his childhood. Money was scarce and opportunity scarcer. From an early age, he learned that doors, literal and figurative, rarely opened for people like him. As a boy, he showed a strange fascination with locks. While other children traded marbles, he scavenged broken padlocks from junkyards, prying them apart to see how the tiny tumblers worked. Neighbors remember a quiet kid with restless eyes who could disappear for hours into his own world of mechanical puzzles. By 12, he was slipping into abandoned buildings for the thrill of exploration, memorizing blueprints in his mind like a photographic map. His teenage years were marked by a dangerous blend of intelligence and rebellion. Petty thefts turned into break-ins, not for profit but for the adrenaline of outsmarting barriers. Police reports from those years describe a phantom intruder who left no trace, until the night he was caught hot-wiring a car at 16. Juvenile detention became his first taste of captivity. Ironically, it also became his first laboratory. He studied the schedules of guards, the placement of security cameras, and the weak points in fences. After release, he drifted from job to job, mechanic, warehouse loader, part-time locksmith, never staying long. Each position taught him something: how to work a key blank, how to read blueprints, how to blend in. But his impulsive streak remained. A botched robbery in his mid-20s ended with an arrest that would change everything. This time, the sentence was real time, a maximum security facility built to crush escape fantasies. Prison life, however, did not crush him. It fueled him. While other inmates joined gangs or resigned themselves to endless routine, he observed. He timed guard rotations down to the second, memorized the vibrations of every door as it locked, and studied the maintenance staff as they repaired heating ducts and plumbing lines. He noticed that humans, not walls, were the weak link. The first escape was almost an accident of opportunity. A guard forgot to relock a maintenance door after a late-night repair. Our future Houdini noticed the slip and disappeared into the storm outside before the mistake was discovered. When he was recaptured days later, officials blamed the guard, insisting it would never happen again. They had no idea that a seed had been planted. From that moment, the man became obsessed. Each return to prison was a challenge, not a punishment. He devoured books on engineering and psychology from the prison library. He taught himself to pick complex locks using improvised tools, bits of wire from mop handles, a shaved toothbrush handle shaped into a tension wrench. What set him apart wasn't just mechanical skill, it was patience. He could wait months for a single weak moment, masking his ambition behind a calm, cooperative facade. Guards often described him as polite, even helpful. Some came to trust him, never suspecting that behind those steady eyes, calculations were constant. By the time the second escape came, he had perfected the art of misdirection. He created false routines to lull the guards, exercising at the same time each day, volunteering for kitchen duty, feigning illness to learn infirmary layouts. When the night arrived, he slipped through an air duct barely wider than his shoulders, using a rope braided from stolen laundry. News of his second breakout exploded across local headlines. Law enforcement labeled him a master manipulator, but secretly, some admired the audacity. When he was caught again, this time hundreds of miles away, the legend of the Prison Houdini took its first breath. From then on, each capture only sharpened his resolve. He wasn't merely escaping. He was proving that no human design could truly contain a determined mind. And as the public fascination grew, so did his confidence. This was no longer just a man with a criminal past. This was a strategist, an engineer, and perhaps a genius of human behavior. And he was just getting started. By the time he returned to a cell for the second time, the man the press had begun calling Prison Houdini had transformed prison into his personal laboratory. His mind worked like a clockmaker's, gears of observation, patience, and strategy meshing in quiet perfection. He knew that brute force never wins against concrete and steel. What wins is foresight, understanding how people behave and how systems fail. He began with the most basic element of escape: information. To him, every hallway was a map waiting to be drawn, every routine a pattern waiting to be broken. While other inmates joked or argued in the chow line, he mentally measured distances between doors and counted guard footsteps. He watched who held keys and when they shifted belts from one hip to another. He memorized the sound each lock made when turned, clicks, creaks, and the tiny scrape of a bolt. To an untrained ear, these were meaningless noises. To him, they were music, each note revealing how the mechanism inside was shaped. But observation was only the beginning. He possessed a talent for illusion. Guards described him as the perfect prisoner, polite, cooperative, even helpful. He volunteered for cleanup duty, fixed squeaky hinges in the library, and offered to tutor younger inmates in math. These gestures lowered defenses. Officers stopped double-checking his movements. Some even confided small bits of gossip that he stored away like treasures. Who was working overtime? Which gates needed maintenance? When a camera was temporarily offline. He also mastered the art of disguise and deception. In one prison, he learned to mimic the gait of a night shift guard, studying the man's rhythm of steps and slight limp. Later, during a well-planned blackout drill, he slipped into a borrowed maintenance uniform and walked past 3 checkpoints without a glance. When questioned after capture, he calmly explained that blending in was easier than hiding. People see what they expect to see, he told one investigator. Give them the picture they already have in their heads, and they'll never notice the details that don't fit. Tools were another obsession. Of course, he had no access to hardware stores. Instead, he turned everyday objects into precision instruments. A piece of wire from a broken radio became a lockpick. The spring from a ballpoint pen served as a tension wrench. He shaved plastic toothbrush handles into wedges for prying open vents. Sometimes he tested these tools for weeks on scrap padlocks smuggled from the prison workshop, perfecting the delicate feel of tumblers shifting beneath his fingertips. Equally impressive was his psychological manipulation. He understood that an escape doesn't begin the night you climb the fence. It begins months earlier, when you plant seeds in people's minds. He would create small distractions, helping a guard with paperwork, causing a harmless plumbing accident, volunteering for late chores, until staff unconsciously relaxed their vigilance around him. One warden later admitted that he made you want to trust him. Perhaps most astonishing was his ability to plan for chaos. He didn't just map a single route. He prepared layers of contingencies. If the guard came 5 minutes early, he had a hiding place. If the fence lights flickered back on, he knew a second path. He even stashed tiny caches of food or cash at multiple spots outside the prison walls, so if one plan failed, another could begin instantly. Over time, he treated each prison like a personal chessboard. Every guard shift was a pawn, every maintenance schedule a bishop. He played not for days or weeks, but for the long game, sometimes waiting nearly a year before making a single move. Fellow inmates recalled him staring silently at walls, as if seeing beyond them. The authorities, embarrassed and desperate to predict his next trick, upgraded security at every facility that held him. They doubled guard rotations, installed new surveillance cameras, and reinforced doors with tamper-proof locks. Yet these measures only sharpened his creativity. Each time they raised a barrier, he discovered a subtler way around it. Through ventilation shafts, hidden tunnels, forged passes, or perfectly timed diversions. By his third and fourth escapes, journalists had begun calling him a ghost, and correctional departments across the country circulated his methods in staff training manuals. Still, he remained 2 steps ahead, turning every tightening of security into a new puzzle to solve. For him, escape wasn't merely a bid for freedom. It was an art form, a private duel with an entire system. Every breakout was proof that no matter how strong the walls, a patient and brilliant mind could find the seam where weakness hides. And yet, despite the extraordinary planning and flawless execution, the legend of Prison Houdini was only halfway written. 4 escapes down. 3 more to go. Each more daring than the last. Each a masterpiece of cunning that would cement his place as the most elusive prisoner of his time. By the time he was locked away for the 3rd time, the man the world now called Prison Houdini had become a headline machine. Each new facility promised escape-proof security. Each warden swore this would be the end of his legend. And every time, he turned their confidence into humiliation. Escape 1. The Spark. The first breakout seemed almost accidental. A maintenance door left unlatched during a storm gave him a slim window. While the rest of the prison huddled from thunder, he slipped through a boiler room and out a service gate, vanishing into sheets of rain. He was recaptured within a week, but he had proven to himself that the impossible was possible. Escape 2. The Air Duct Phantom. His second escape showed true artistry. Months of watching ventilation crews revealed a duct system that linked the laundry room to a delivery bay. He fashioned a rope from bed sheets, pried a vent loose with a toothbrush-turned wedge, and shimmied 40 feet through a metal tube barely wider than his chest. Guards never heard a sound. When they found the empty bunk at dawn, he was already hitchhiking toward another state. Escape 3. The Uniform Trick. In a medium security facility upstate, he played the long game. Befriending a maintenance officer, he observed every detail of the man's posture and walk. On a night when a fire drill caused confusion, he wore a stolen uniform and simply walked past 3 checkpoints, copying the guard's slight limp. Cameras caught him on tape, but staff swore they had seen their coworker. Escape 4. The Forged Pass. By now he was a national story. Authorities transferred him to a fortress-like prison with multiple ID checkpoints. He countered with forgery. Using scraps of paper from the library and a stolen stamp from an inattentive clerk, he created a near-perfect visitor's pass. One calm afternoon, he blended in with a departing contractor crew and exited through the main gate. The warden resigned a month later. Escape 5. The Tunnel Gamble. His 5th breakout took patience and sweat. Assigned to a workshop, he dug a narrow tunnel behind a row of heavy machines, removing dirt in small plastic bags hidden inside trash bins. Over 6 months, he carved a 30-foot path beneath the prison wall. One moonless night, he crawled through the damp passage, emerging in a drainage ditch a mile away. Searchlights swept right over him. Escape 6. The Riot Diversion. Now infamous, he was transferred to a maximum security facility built like a fortress. But chaos is opportunity. When a brawl erupted in the yard, he used the distraction to climb scaffolding erected for roof repairs. With a rope of knotted laundry and perfect timing, he cleared 2 layers of razor wire. He vanished into surrounding woods while guards focused on quelling the riot. Escape 7. The Masterstroke. His final known escape remains the most debated. Official records are vague, and some believe he had inside help. Placed under near-constant surveillance, he feigned illness for weeks, earning trips to the infirmary. On a stormy evening, when a generator failed, he disappeared without a trace. Some claim he disguised himself as a paramedic during the emergency. Others believe he found a forgotten maintenance tunnel. Authorities never confirmed the method. What is certain is that for months he lived free, crossing multiple states before a routine traffic stop finally ended the run. Each of these escapes was more than a jailbreak. It was a lesson in human oversight. Guards grew paranoid, wardens defensive, and the public fascinated. Newspapers portrayed him as both villain and folk hero, a criminal, yes, but also a living riddle who outsmarted systems built to crush individuality. Despite the recaptures, he never showed bitterness when caught. "Walls are just puzzles," he once told an interviewer. "Every puzzle has a solution. You just have to find it." By the 7th breakout, he was no longer simply a prisoner. He was a symbol of persistence, ingenuity, and the uncomfortable truth that no system is flawless. His legend forced prisons nationwide to rewrite training manuals and upgrade security protocols, a legacy that continues today. But while the escapes themselves were breathtaking, what followed, the relentless manhunts, the cat-and-mouse games with law enforcement, would elevate his story from remarkable to unforgettable. Every escape set off a chain reaction that stretched far beyond the prison walls. For law enforcement, each breakout was not just a crime, it was a public spectacle and a professional embarrassment. The man, now universally called Prison Houdini, turned every manhunt into a test of pride and endurance for the agencies chasing him. National alarm. Within hours of each disappearance, radio alerts and television tickers flashed his name across the country. Police departments in neighboring states doubled patrols. Highway checkpoints sprang up overnight. Officers studied his photograph until they could recite every line of his face. But he seemed to dissolve into the landscape. Sometimes he hopped freight trains, blending with transient workers. Other times he hid in plain sight, doing day labor for cash, shaving his head, growing a beard, even dyeing his hair with cheap drugstore kits. He exploited the chaos of crowds. City marathons, county fairs, and flea markets became his camouflage. The pursuit. For detectives, tracking him was like chasing smoke. Each sighting came with a dose of frustration. A diner waitress who swore she served him eggs and coffee. a truck driver who thought he saw him thumbing a ride near a rest stop. By the time police arrived, he was gone. Special task forces were formed after his fourth escape, combining U.S. Marshals, state troopers, and local detectives. They studied his past movements like a chessboard, mapping habits and possible hideouts. Yet his routes rarely repeated. He would surface hundreds of miles from expected locations, as if he knew their strategies in advance. One marshal described him as a ghost who understands the hunt better than the hunters. Another said, "He's always thinking 2 exits ahead." Cat and mouse. Mind games. Prison. Houdini wasn't content to simply vanish. He occasionally taunted his pursuers, never overtly, but through subtle gestures. After his fifth escape, a postcard arrived at a small-town sheriff's office showing a photo of a mountain range. Scrawled on the back were the words, "Beautiful view, isn't it?" No fingerprints, no return address. Investigators couldn't prove it was him, but the timing, days after a near sighting in that region, was too perfect to ignore. Rumors spread that he listened to police scanners, which in some escapes proved true. He'd slipped through an area moments before a roadblock was established, almost as if he'd been warned. Some officers suspected sympathizers along his route, people fascinated by his myth who offered a couch, a hot meal, and silence. Media frenzy and public reaction. Each manhunt attracted national headlines, and the public was divided. Many feared him, especially after reports of burglaries where he scavenged supplies. Yet others secretly rooted for him. Editorials debated whether he was a dangerous criminal or a modern-day folk hero exposing flaws in a bloated prison system. Talk shows speculated about his intelligence. Was he a savant, or simply fearless? True crime magazines sold out when his story graced their covers. Parents warned children to lock doors, but some teenagers taped his photo to bedroom walls like a rebellious idol. Close calls. There were moments when capture seemed certain. In one chase, officers cornered him in a rural barn after a farmer spotted a stranger near his property, but by the time the team surrounded the building, he had vanished through a hidden crawl space and into a drainage culvert. Dogs picked up his scent for several miles before losing it in a rushing creek. Another near miss occurred at a Greyhound station. A plainclothes detective swore he brushed shoulders with him in a restroom. When backup arrived minutes later, they found only a discarded jacket and a pair of sunglasses. Toll on authorities. For police and wardens, these hunts were exhausting and humiliating. Budgets ballooned with overtime pay, surveillance equipment, and interagency meetings. Politicians demanded answers, and prison administrators faced angry questions about security failures. Each time they tightened procedures, he found another crack. Warden after warden retired early, some admitting in interviews that he haunted their careers. "You never stop looking over your shoulder," one said. "If he could walk out of my prison, anyone could." The hunts revealed a truth that officials hated to admit. No system is perfect. Every fence has a weak post. Every routine has a gap. And as long as someone like Prison Houdini existed, those weaknesses could be found and exploited. Yet even as he repeatedly eluded capture, the walls were always waiting. Sooner or later, every chase ended with flashing lights and handcuffs. But the legend only grew, feeding the question that still lingers. Was this a man running from prison, or running toward something only he understood? When the final set of handcuffs clicked around his wrists, it should have been the end of the story. But legends don't fade with a single arrest. Even after his seventh capture, Prison Houdini remained a name that stirred awe, frustration, and uneasy admiration across the country. The final capture. The last time authorities found him was almost anticlimactic. A routine traffic stop in a sleepy Midwest town revealed a man with forged identification and a calm, almost amused smile. The arresting officer later recalled that he didn't struggle or even flinch. He simply raised his hands and said, "Took you long enough." By then, He had spent more of his life behind bars than outside them, yet there was no bitterness in his voice. It was as if the chase itself, not freedom, had always been his real pursuit. Life after the escapes. Officials knew that placing him in an ordinary facility would be asking for another embarrassment. This time, he was transferred to a newly built supermax prison, a place designed to crush escape fantasies with technology and relentless surveillance. Multiple camera angles tracked every step. Guards rotated shifts in unpredictable patterns. Doors were controlled by electronic systems impossible to override with handmade tools. And yet, even there, rumors persisted. Some guards swore they caught him smiling as he watched them adjust security monitors, as if he were still plotting, still cataloging every weakness. Though he never escaped again, his presence forced the prison to maintain constant vigilance, a silent reminder that no system is flawless. Influence on the prison system. His 7 escapes became case studies in criminology and corrections programs across the nation. Training manuals now cite the Houdini factor, a set of security checks inspired by his exploits, double-locking maintenance doors, randomizing guard routes, and using biometric IDs instead of paper passes. Warden conferences replayed his methods like sports coaches analyzing game footage, searching for lessons hidden in each audacious breakout. He had unwittingly modernized American prison security. Every tunnel he dug, every forged pass he carried, pushed authorities to innovate. It was a strange legacy. A man who broke laws so effectively that he ultimately strengthened them. Cultural icon and folk hero. Outside the walls, his legend only grew. True crime documentaries devoted entire seasons to his escapes. Podcasts dissected each breakout in forensic detail. Writers compared him to Robin Hood or Harry Houdini, an anti-hero who exposed the cracks in a supposedly unbreakable system. For some, he was a cautionary tale of wasted brilliance, a mind that could have revolutionized engineering or security but chose crime instead. For others, he became a symbol of indomitable will, proof that no cage can contain a person who refuses to accept limitations. Children of the 1990s and 2000s grew up hearing his name in urban legends, the man who could slip through shadows, the escape artist who mocked the very idea of confinement. Even people who knew nothing of his real life repeated the stories, each retelling, adding a little more magic to his myth. The man behind the myth. In rare interviews, he offered glimpses into his mindset. When asked why he kept escaping, he never claimed it was for glory or revenge. "Freedom is a puzzle," he once said quietly. "I don't like unsolved puzzles." That single sentence captured the paradox of his life. He wasn't merely running from bars and guards, he was chasing the intellectual thrill of the unsolvable, the satisfaction of proving that every lock has a key, if you're patient enough to find it. Enduring mystery. Today, his true name appears in dusty court records and old police files, but most people remember only the legend, Prison Houdini. Whether he spends his remaining years in quiet reflection or still dreams of another breakout is anyone's guess. Friends who have visited him in later life describe a man content but sharp-eyed, still curious about every detail of the world beyond his cell. And so the questions remain. Was he a criminal mastermind, a misunderstood genius, or simply a man addicted to the chase? Whatever the answer, his story changed how we view both captivity and freedom. Because as long as people build walls, there will be minds searching for the cracks,